All right, here we are, kicking it off live here on a Friday, something that we don't normally do on this channel, but nonetheless, we're going to do it anyhow, and we're going to talk to a new guest here. Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. So, welcome to the channel. I know you've been around the channel for a while, kind of watching the videos and chit chatting back and forth with me on X and all that good stuff, and I just wanted to kind of put you on here and let everybody know what it is that not only what you do with your pictures, because you do some fantastic work with colorization of Civil War photographs and older
Thank you.
photographs, but also you're an educator as well, correct?
I am. I've got wow, 25 years or so in education, educational technology mostly. 2008, I got my doctorate in instructional technology from Duquesne University. Studying actually back then, I studied how teachers use technology to teach the topic of the American Civil War.
Okay.
So, and back then, the number one response was they used the Ken Burns movie.
Yeah.
So, but even back then, like things like Valley of the Shadow Project were available, and sometimes they were used, but not as frequently as like the Ken Burns movie,
Right.
which is crazy to me.
Yeah, it is crazy, and now teachers have just this full cache of different things that they can choose from in order to instruct in their classrooms. Of course, they have to be extremely careful from what they pull. But channels like the History Underground with JD Hewitt
Mhm.
on there, that's some pretty nice stuff. I know JD himself. He got started because of teaching and trying to create content that people were able to consume in classrooms and make it a little bit easier to break little bits of information down. What's your opinion on being able to use YouTube, for example, for a classroom setting?
So it's gotten a lot better, and depending on how like school networks, K to I focus on K to 12. Colleges are open, obviously, but
Yeah.
you know, even not so much. Again, you make great contact. JD makes great contact. Vlogging through history, great channels. But there's also like the National Park Service. So Gettysburg
Yep.
National Military Park has podcasts, or not but videos, and Antietam, if we're going to stick to the Civil War. But there's also other channels that, again, these are park service, so they are geared toward, they're not controversial necessarily, or they're really good, so you can target those. And what's really nice with some of the modern apps out there, that you can, like EduPuzzle or whatever, you can take these videos and break them up and put them into and ask questions as kids go through it. So it's not just watch a 30-minute video. It's take that video and break it up and then ask a question, so it retains some learning in it.
Yeah. So, what got you interested in history in the first place?
Oh, my dad was a history teacher, 30
Oh, okay.
some 35 years or something. He taught middle school US history. So growing up in Western PA, we'd always go to places like Fort Ligonier, Fort Necessity, Whiskey Rebellion kind of stuff. And then we would go to Gettysburg, or those different places throughout the years. And then I don't know if I was married yet, or right before I got married, or right after I got married. We were watching a 4th of July parade in Latrobe,
Okay.
and a Civil War unit went by, and it was the 11th Pennsylvania. They were recreating the 11th PVI, and I'm like, I want to do that. So I got
Nice.
into reenacting, and the most that's how I kind of got deep into the Civil War, was doing that.
Yeah. So you became a thread counter?
No, no, never got that, because again, I had kids, so
Yeah.
I was never a thread counter. But the best part that I liked, and I didn't, after a little while, I didn't like going out and doing the shooting and the battles and stuff. I enjoyed standing in camp and talking to people and answering questions, and
Yeah.
uh, that was just more fun for me. And I told my wife, actually, just not too long ago, we were walking around Gettysburg or something. I'm like, I miss that part. I miss
Yeah.
standing there talking to people, answering questions, and just helping them understand things better, and maybe necessarily in their terms.
Right.
Like, it's not. Then there's a need for historians, your Gary Edelmans, your Tim Smiths, that can tell you exactly where, let's just say, the 11th PVI fought at Gettysburg and how many units they had, and this and this, this. There's a need for that, absolutely. But there's also the need for, this is why that they're fighting at this particular location was important. not necessarily how many units, how many people they had, or why Gettysburg as an overarching 15,000 foot is important. So,
Right.
I mean, so there's both levels, and I try to meet that 15,000 level. I've never tried to take the guide test. I'd fail it miserably. I mean, I can't retain it.
Yeah.
As much as I sit and I read the books, I see your Civil War books on the back, the Time Life ones.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Those are great books for just primary sources and looking at pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
Now a lot of them are available online, but trying to read Coddington or something like that, just your eyes roll over sometimes.
Well, I talked to Tim Smith not too long ago at Adams County Historical Society, and we're going to put a video out here of that interview. But he told me that himself, he was this kind of wealth of knowledge because he was always able to retain information.
Mm.
His issue is writing. He's not that big of a writer. But so a person like that obviously would be able to read scores and scores of information and discern for themselves fact from fiction and be able to use that when they're teaching or talking to people, and then not so much be able to write the history themselves. So I think that's where a lot of this comes in is YouTube and media. We're basically like storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
We can take in the information and then we can switch it into a personal story, or maybe add some touch to it to where people will latch onto it with their emotions, because that's really what you want people to connect to, the real emotional side of being in conflict with people who might potentially be your brothers, who might potentially be your family members from up north. I mean, North Carolina, for example, Gettys lived in Rutherford County, North Carolina. They migrated down or immigrated down from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The actual sons from Gettysburg. Eventually, they would have members to go on and fight for the Confederate Army. And that's that kind of tactile link between ancestry and Gettysburg and the Confederacy, just like with Tom McMillan's book Gettysburg Rebels. You want people to think about those things. And so I understand what you're talking about, especially with the reenacting aspect,
Mm-hmm.
setting up the table, talking to people, letting them touch and feel
Touch
items
and
and show
feel.
them.
I'd go out to schools. Now it's kind of taboo to go into schools with a musket or whatever, even,
Yeah,
historically. But, just having kids touch some wool or touch a bullet and those types of things is really cool to be able to do that. And then, the other thing that I teach, is so there's a couple ways to look at it. Like historical inquiry is what they really call it. But
yeah,
I always thought about it as thinking like a historian. So, or history's detectives kind of thing. Like you could take a kid, and you're probably familiar with doing the high res video, high res images.
yeah,
I've been showing people how to do that for 20 years. But so you take that and you drop a kid inside a photo, let's just say, or you show a photo and like, okay, you're a detective, you're a crime scene, like you're at a crime scene. What crime happened here? What can you garner from this photograph? And how do you engage in it? And then you find something in that photo, and what is that object and how did it get there? So again, just looking at those things, and then you can go read accounts of events that took place either from a Confederate side and from a Union side, and say, why do they differ?
yeah,
You know what I mean? They're not always as accurate. And as even in today's society, you go to one news channel, you get one report, you go to another channel, you get a different report or a news source or whatever, and you got to try to discern that information. So getting kids to read primary source texts allows them to think more critically, I think, in my opinion. It's called thinking like a historian or reading like a historian kind of thing. That's what the researchers call it.
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that for me, whenever I'm looking for these stories to tell, that's that's what I'm looking for. I want the battle facts, but then I also want the facts coming from the soldiers themselves. I want to hear their story. I want them to
Mm-hmm.
tell it to me. And you have to turn off that thing inside your mind that's preset on what you think is right, and then listen to what they're trying to tell you, and then tell it from their eyes, the way that they see those things. So
The other way to do it too is that like you can take kids and say, oh, well, there were 7,000 soldiers that were killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. And they're like, what does that number mean? It's like, it's 7,000, big deal. Well, how many people can fit in your high school football stadium?
mhm.
well, we would fill that or whatever, or when you say 55,000 were killed, wounded, or captured at Gettysburg, what does that number mean? Well, have you ever been to Beaver Stadium? That's, or whatever. It's like, it would almost fill that. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but, some of
Yeah.
the bigger, but if you find that, then they can some kind of perspective of how many people. So you try to relate to it.
Yeah.
You relate it to them in a way that they can understand it.
Absolutely. So I've noticed that you were on Matt Callery's channel addressing Gettysburg.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He is, right? I mean,
I
he's
ran into him. I was, I don't know, driving around Gettysburg one day, and I'm like, that's Matt Gallery. And I went and said hi. And I started pointing out, he was on Culp's Hill, and I was pointing out rock carvings to him. He's like, I didn't know those were there. And so
yeah,
I started telling him about what I did, and I ended up on his channel, I think, twice now. So
yeah. No, he's pretty cool, dude. And I find it funny too. Like the first time I went to Gettysburg and saw JD over there, I'm sitting beside my wife. I'm like, hey, that's the guy from the History Underground. And my wife's like, who?
who?
Yeah. So to the history community and people like us, that's a big deal. Everybody else is kind of like, what are you talking about, man? So how often do you go to Gettysburg?
Not as often as I'd like, but probably, during this time of year, once or twice a month. Once a month, would probably. Like,
Yeah,
I'm off next Thursday because of the holiday, so I might take my daughter and go down, or we're definitely going to make a trip down over the anniversary for sure.
yeah, yeah. So you and I bumped into each other out there at Gettysburg too at
We did in
Devil's
Devil's
Den.
Den. Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm out
So,
there
like,
goofing
even when
around
I'm
with
in
the camera.
Devil's Den, I always have those photos on my iPad or whatever, and like showing people like that photo was taken right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Where
Those are
you
pretty
put
cool.
kids. So, I talk about taking kids. Taking kids, you can use a green screen. Like you say, you use your phone. I've got a fancy setup here, but you can take your phone and get kids in front of a green screen, and put an image behind them of that dead body or any scene in any part of history from I don't care when, and say, do a report on that. I want
Yeah,
you to be a news reporter on that. So it allows kids to be creative
yeah,
and to express themselves. Can they write a report? Yes. They can go sit and write 500 words on this snooze, right?
yeah,
Or you can let them create, and most of them can do it on their phones now. They can do it with CapCut in minutes. Some of them,
yeah,
or taking that information, and then it allows them to ingrain it a little bit better than just writing a dumb old report.
yeah. That's
In
true.
my opinion.
What's your thought on AI?
I'm getting into it more and more. I mean, Chat GPT is easy, if you will, or Gemini or Copilot. Those are easy tools to use, but I'm I'm exploring this whole making characters come to life thing, you
Yeah,
know. Not a free version of it yet, but
yeah.
um I signed up and I got a student account of the Google Flow
Okay.
and VO3, which is, if you're on TikTok or whatever, you've seen these Yeti videos or these historical figures talking. They're 8-second clips.
Yeah,
So you got to create them, but it's all about prompting. You
yeah,
can create the prompt and whatnot. But I enjoy using AI just for fun things like that. And even I just did one the other day, like what I do. Oh, Abraham Lincoln as a Simpsons character, like, you know, just little things like that. It's so much fun to do. Creating these images and using them in terms of AI,
yeah,
being allowed to, it's wild. It's the
yeah,
possibilities of it. Um, there's some, you got to be careful, you know what I mean, as was with anything, but in the same sense, it allows you to think deeper too. So
yeah. It
depending
does.
on your use, I like, the one I think I did a blog post on it was rewrite the Gettysburg Address in a particular author or historical person. So, rewrite it as, Martin Luther King Jr., or write it as Stephen King, or um, write it as J.K. Rowling, or Dr. Seuss.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fun to do. It's so fun. It's
yeah. It
fun with
is.
kids.
Yeah, people have to be careful with it too, though. I know for a fact I've kind of played around with ChatGPT every once in a while to kind of see if how much information I can pull, or if there's a source that I can find through there to be able to link myself to directly to a source. And if you go in there just straight asking it questions, it's going to give you an answer.
Right.
But when you go back and do some research, you'll find out that a lot of what those sites are putting out there to you is some sort of a false narrative that's coming from some website somewhere, and they're thinking the ChatGPT is making out to be a fact, and it's
Right.
just not.
They call them hallucinations.
Yeah, yeah, I'll say. I've definitely seen some stories created on there about fictitious soldiers and things like that couldn't have possibly um, existed during the American Civil War, and it really makes you wonder if you're able to, if you know history and you're able to discern that for yourself. How many people out there do not?
Yeah,
And
lots of them, and they just accept it.
yeah, yeah. But I do like the AI where you can take historical photographs and make them come alive.
I saw you did that the other day at the beginning of one of your videos. I might have been
Yeah,
the first shot monument one. You had
yeah.
those guys like looking around and like
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I
wanted to
saw a
add that
Robert E.
as
Lee
kind of a
one too. That
touch.
was cool.
I had a lot of people tell me it freaked them out though.
Yeah.
So
I like taking, again, how can we do it with kids and how can we get kids engaged in doing history is how I look at it. You know, again, just colorizing images, then and now images, zooming in and out of high resolution images, all those types of things. Google Maps, Google Earth. How can we do it and even better, do it free?
yeah,
Because teachers have no money to spend on resources. You know what I mean? They don't have $120 a month to use Google Flow.
right.
But they can use Google Earth or Google Maps and
Yeah,
go to all these battlefields. We just from the sands of when we just had D-Day. You can go to the Normandy beaches and look around. And you
yeah,
can also travel. You can go right to the Rose Farm in Gettysburg.
yeah. That's pretty neat. I mean, for me, the best way to get people involved in history, though, is just to take them there. Um,
Well, it's easy to say that, but when you're in a classroom and you don't have the money to take a kid on a field trip to any location, you can use these tools to get them there.
yeah,
I
yeah,
did. I mean, a lot of people do it now. I did it eons ago when I would go in and I'd Skype into classrooms from my phone.
yeah,
And just, hey, anybody want to jump on a Skype? And I'm going to be walking in Pickett's Charge and talking about the battle. And I'm talking to kids in Kansas or Wisconsin or whatever, just helping them understand the events.
right,
And that was 20 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, it's when
yeah.
the technology wasn't what it is today.
But
I remember. I
I also
remember.
think a lot of that has to do with the individual, though, because, for example, you can't force a person to play sports if they don't want to play sports.
Right.
Um, and it's the same thing to do with American history or any kind of history. A lot of that spark comes from a person that inspires them, or maybe their imagination. For me, for example, I was just a tiny little kid and got brought out to a Civil War battlefield in Florida, and then a Revolutionary War battlefield in South Carolina. And that was the thing that lit me off in this whole journey as an adult, being
Yeah.
so obsessed to fill my shelves with books. You know.
Mhm. I can't remember as a kid so much, but I think like a lot of us, the Frasinitos journey in time,
Yes.
really got me hooked. And then I saw, again, I keep saying eons, like probably 2005 or something. I saw a YouTube video of a guy who had done then and now photos, but literally it was just this, like a photo and then another photo of the same location. And I'm like, okay, why can't I overlay them?
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured out how I could overlay them in using tools, software like a Photoshop kind of thing, and overlay them so that and then it's really a then and now. So showing people how to do that.
Yeah.
You can take those. There's a lot of like photographs and postcards on eBay of lots of
Okay.
these little towns that you can go find the postcard of your town and then take a modern photograph and overlay it. A lot of these historical societies now have um, digital archives of photos and things that you can search. So that's the thing is these digital repositories have become just massive now. Everybody seems to have them.
So how time consuming is it for you to be able to take a historical photo and reproduce that color?
It depends on the complexity. Like I can do a portrait of somebody in an hour or something like that. But I just started. I don't know which one it is. I think it's the Harvest of Death. This one, it's the part of that series. I just started
Yeah.
that one just for the heck of it. And that's going to be weeks. I also don't do it constantly. I'll do it for half an hour here before I go to bed, or I'll do it for a few minutes here and there. They're my adult coloring books, so I just use them as relaxation.
Okay.
So I just sort of sit and relax and do them. Um, I don't sell them or anything. Matt got on me for selling. You need to sell these and put them in a calendar. And sure, I don't even know how to do that. You know what I mean? Um,
He's
so
not wrong.
I know, and I just for the longest time when I first started it, I didn't even watermark them. Now at least I watermark them.
Yeah.
So I found somebody was selling them one time, one of my early photographs, and I was like, oh, I got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot better too. So learning the tool over the years and having, I have just not unlike an artist has, um, the paints that they use, and they know what colors of paints. I have the palettes of colors that I use for uniforms and things like that. So it makes it a lot faster and a lot
Okay.
easier. But it's all about the complexity of the image too.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. Well, here pretty soon they're going to come out with some sort of AI program to do that as well.
They already have them, and I don't like it. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
I don't. They still don't look. You can tell they're AI colored.
Really?
Yeah, you really can. And there's just something about it. And there are some people out there that are really good at colorizations. There are some professionals that do it, and they're
Yeah.
super good at it. And I just do it for fun, but I don't like the AI. The colors are just seem a bit off, and I can pick them out pretty quick anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and anymore I have to post to say this is hand colored. It's not AI generated kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I do
Oh,
progress video. I'll do progress ones, so I'll show clips of, or like screenshots of the work that in progress.
so that's kind of the one thing I noticed too about pictures and people's colorizations. You go to enough museums and you see these uniforms in person, you can kind of tell how many variances and differences there were back in those days with all types of clothing and uniforms. Um, how are you able to identify and pick that stuff out in order to create that color?
Artist interpretation on some of it.
Okay. Okay.
Some of it is artist interpretation. Some of it is just the way that the image picks up the color.
Okay.
And so if you hit one side that's has more sun on it, it might come up like a little lighter color.
Yeah.
Depending on which way, like if the light's coming from the right side. Sorry, my hand's kind of breaking up there. Then that side might show a little lighter. And some of it is I just pick lighter shades and different shades. So you can also do, let's say you have a regiment, then typically the privates in that would have colors of jackets that are very similar.
Okay.
But the officers probably have different shades because they're private purchase. So, you go through those types of things. The Confederates are a little harder
Yeah.
because different colors of browns and grays and things like that. So some of that is a little bit of research. There's a book out there on the uniforms of the Civil War Union uniforms helps. I follow on Facebook, I think it's a Wamba and White, I think is the name of it.
Oh yeah, they're good. They're good.
But they're always posting examples of the stuff that they have. So I can take that image and grab a color from it and
Yeah.
so I can take that uniform, grab a color from it, and then use it in a colorization.
Well, let me tell you from experience, if you ever get it in your mind to pick up a Wamba white kit and sew it yourself,
Pass.
good luck. I don't know what they do over there. They have magic in their hands in order to sew that stuff up. But I
Yeah,
tried
I
my
tried
hands on it
sewing the
one time.
US. I tried to sew the US into my blanket one time and failed miserably and just ended up ripping it out.
Yeah, I tried a show kill jacket one time, and it's still in my closet in a nice container. So
Okay. Skookle.
yeah, yeah, it's done. So how much travel have you done? Do you come down south of Virginia at all from
Uh,
Pennsylvania?
Not really. We come down, but not like to visit battlefields and stuff. I've been to Norfolk just over Christmas or over Easter. I was in Norfolk. Remember?
Yeah, yeah,
Come down and watched the Norfolk Admirals play the Stingrays, the Carolina Stingrays down there.
yeah.
We will come down once in a while. Not as much as I'd like. There's some places that I really want to visit. I haven't been to Appomattox yet, and it's like on a bucket list. I'd really like to go there and see
Yeah.
Appomattox. I've been like down to Stonewall's, area and driven down a lot of like Route 95 kind of thing, or Route 81. We go to Winchester. We've been to Winchester quite a few times. I like that.
Yeah.
Um, that battlefield. I like that reenactment in the fall too. It's not
Okay.
the same, not the same since COVID, but it's still a really nice reenactment.
Well, I like to say that people who live in the Virginia area are pretty lucky when it comes to history because there's a lot of stuff to visit and see out here.
Right.
Um, and you can always tell the difference between somebody that comes down to Virginia and who comes down there often and who doesn't. Just like Pennsylvania, people call Reading, Pennsylvania, Reading.
Reading. It's Reading.
Reading, yeah,
Reading. Yeah.
and some people say Norfolk, but
Norfolk.
in Virginia it's Norfolk.
Norfolk.
Yeah,
I know
it's kind of
finding a
funny.
place to park there was impossible to get some pizza or something in
Well,
Norfolk.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the MacArthur Mall is pretty much it. I mean, if you're not parking in that mall, you're not finding a spot.
Yeah.
I can't really call it a mall though. It's kind of a ghost town. So
Yeah. We talk about doing things with you, even as a researcher, you can take the maps of of a battle that you might see, like some of these organizations like the Battlefield Trust, or there's some maps of different battles and actions, and you can overlay them into like a Google Earth, so you can actually see
yeah,
how that would have laid out on the battlefield as it looks now, not just a hand drawing. Steve Stanley does some great maps and things like that.
right,
um, so taking those maps and then overlaying them, or you talk about reading accounts. So you read an account of a unit that may have been firing at another, the Confederates or Union or whatever it may be. What's the distance that they were apart? And you can measure those distances in Google Earth to try to get an idea of where they were on the battlefield when that account said that they were firing at them.
yeah, yeah,
So it's just ways to, again, just not necessarily expand your knowledge, but get kids in doing it, or you as a historian, to try to figure out ways that you can better understand the events that happened and or the terrain.
right,
Hey, I'm planning a trip to Gettysburg or whatever. I'm planning a trip to Antietam, and I want to see how the troops marched past the Dunker Church into the wheat field or into the cornfield or whatever. And um, the what does that terrain look like? So
yeah,
you can look at that, and you can look at elevations and things. So when you talk about that, so it's really a matter of just using the tools to better understand and learn about whatever. It doesn't have to be Gettysburg or whatever Civil War. You can be other wars too that you're just passionate about.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a fact versus fiction situation too. You read the book Killer Angels, you watch the movie, you read historical books, you listen to soldiers' accounts, and all of them are telling one story about Little Round Top, and then you go there in person, and it's underwhelming. It's
It's
a hill,
underwhelming. It's yeah, barely a
yeah,
hill.
it's barely a hill, and you got it in your mind that there's this ginormous. Matter of fact, Big Round Top is what you have in mind, probably.
Yeah,
But you think of this huge hill, and these soldiers are going back and forth, and the little divot that the 20th Maine's actually sitting in is really not that much of a stretch from where they were going up and down the hill. So, I
right.
mean, that's that context that historians talk about, and we try to whenever I try to build a video, I try to give them the spatial view of what they have, so that they can understand when you come out to this field, this is what you're going to see. This is where this happened. Sort of like what you're doing with those photographs. These are real people. This is roughly what they would have looked like in their uniforms, and it's kind of neat to be able to see that and add that to really to the whole history thing. I mean,
Right.
I
It's
think
also hard to like, right. Like as you just said, it's hard to say that that was somebody's husband, son, father, whatever you want to, and what was their story. The famous one of those guys lined up in the Rosewoods. The guy's got his pants down around his knees, and you can see his naked butt in the air. Like he was alive and kicking, and somebody's relative a few days sooner, and there he is. In terms of modesty at that time, you think about stories like that and what it was, who was that person, and those are the kinds of stories that really, or even the ones of people who are alive. What brought them into Matthew Brady's studio in Washington D.C. to get their photo taken.
Right. Yeah.
Those are questions too. When you got Custer and his wife, or George Meade, and whatever, why were they there and why did they get their photo taken, kind of thing, at that particular time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that history has a lot of good people backing it up and keeping it going. So I think we'll be pushing that down the road even further for future generations. So
That's my
we're
goal.
getting
That's
close
what I
to the end
really would
here.
like to do.
We're getting close to the end here, and
Okay.
I wanted to kind of put out there. Maybe you could tell everybody what website they can go to for those photographs to see them for themselves, and what you got going on in the future.
So my main website since forever has been teachthecivilwar.com, and that is where I post a lot of my resources and blog, and I post photos, and there's some how-to videos, links to how-to videos in there. And then on X, I'm at Pfeiffer1863. So right now I'm trying. I got some preloaded posts. I'm going to be off this weekend, but if you follow me, I'm going to be doing coverage of the Gettysburg campaign coming up through the retreat, probably pretty extensively. I do a lot of primary sources there and share quotes and things like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we appreciate you coming on today, and look forward to more of your posts in the future and all that good stuff.
I appreciate the opportunity. I feel honored with some of the guests you've had on the show. So,
hey, we bring on the best, right?
Why am I here?
You got a story too, Jim.
Everybody's got a story.
That's it. All right.
Thank you,
Well,
sir.
we'll see you around, and hopefully we'll have you back on here soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. I couldn't think of a better place to end this video than right here in the middle of the woods, the Battle of the Wilderness, at the hotly contested Brock and Plank Road, Orange Plank Road. Not too far in that direction, Longstreet's wounded. Right here where I'm at right now is a place where men like Wadsworth and Hayes end up losing their lives. Families lose loved ones. Soldiers burn to death in these fields around me here. If you'll let these fields do it, they'll touch your soul.